Let me ask you something. When you look at your teenager right now, do you actually know where they are? Not how they're doing in school, not whether they're being respectful. I mean, developmentally, in their identity formation. Where are they? Because most parents I talk to are working with one of two broken frameworks. Either they're panicking at something completely normal, or they're celebrating something that looks great on the outside and has no idea how fragile it actually is. In this episode, I'm going to give you a map. 4 positions, 2 variables, plain language. And by the end, you'll be able to look at your teenager and say, I know exactly where they are. And I know what this moment actually means for me. I'm Dr. Lem Usita. I study adolescent identity formation, how teenagers develop a sense of self, and what gets in the way. This is episode 2 in a series on phones, teenagers, and formation. If you haven't seen episode 1, I'd start there, but this one stands on its own. The framework I'm about to share comes from James Marcia's research on identity development. I've used it at national conferences for years, and it consistently gives parents the first useful vocabulary they've had for what they're watching in their teenager. Today, I'm going to give you that framework in plain language because the goal isn't for you to memorize academic vocabulary. The goal is for you to see your teenager in it. So let's get into it. If you've been searching for why your teenager seems like a completely different person or why they're either totally drifting or totally certain and you can't get through to them, this is the framework that explains it. Not as a diagnosis, but as a map. The problem with just give them space. The most common advice parents get about teenagers is some version of give them space to figure it out, which is partially true, but space for what? Toward what? And how do you know when space has become absence? Without a map of where your teenager is, you're just hoping. And most parents are either panicking at normal development, shutting down exploration as if it's rebellion, or missing real warning signs because they're celebrating certainty that was never earned. Neither is useful. So let me give you the map. Here's the framework. 2 variables, 4 positions. James Marcia identified that identity formation comes down to 2 things: how much exploration is happening, genuine wrestling with ideas, relationships, and what kind of future they want. And then how strong the commitments are, whether they've arrived at a settled, own sense of who they are. Based on these 2 variables, he mapped 4 positions. I want to give you those 4 positions in language that actually connects. Because Marcia's original academic terms, diffusion, moratorium, foreclosure, achievement, they're precise and important, but they create distance when what you need is recognition, something relatable. So here's the map in plain language: 4 positions, 2 variables. And I think you're going to see your teenager in at least one of them before I'm done. Position number 1, the floater. It's what researchers call diffusion. Low exploration, low commitment. This teenager hasn't engaged the question yet. Not because they're lazy, usually because the conditions for safe exploration haven't been in place. The floater can look like chronic apathy, moving from interest to interest without going deep, avoiding anything that requires taking a real position. Nothing sticks, and you're not sure whether to push or to wait. A phone given to a floater tends to deepen the drift. The algorithm offers an endless supply of identities to sample without committing to any one of them. The teenager doesn't need more access. They need the conditions that make exploration feel enough to try. Position 2, the performer, what researchers call foreclosure: low exploration, low commitment. This teenager knows who they are, or seems to. The performer shows up, says the right things, has answers, seems settled, and parents, especially in faith communities, tend to celebrate this. But the commitments were borrowed, not built. They weren't forged. They adopted the beliefs, values, and identity of their family or community without genuinely testing whether those things are actually theirs. That's not an identity that holds. That's an identity that hasn't been tested yet. And I'm going to spend an entire episode on this one, episode 3, the performer problem because it's the status that carries the most hidden risk for families. For now, just know the teenager who looks the most certain from the outside is often the most vulnerable to collapse when real questions arrive. Position 3, the seeker. This is what researchers called moratorium. High exploration, low commitment. This is the teenager who is actively in the middle of it, questioning, pushing back, trying things on, disagreeing with you, maybe challenging things you've held as givens. The seeker is the position that panics parents the most. But here's what I need you to hear. The seeker is not a crisis. The seeker is developmentally doing exactly what development is supposed to do. The worst thing you can do with a seeker is to shut it down. If the exploration gets suppressed at home, it doesn't disappear. It waits. It waits until they have the freedom to do it without you, which is usually college when they leave your home. And the seeker needs two things above almost everything else: a safe environment to explore, and a mentoring relationship that can stay present without pushing them to commitment before they're ready. Position 4, the rooted, is what researchers called identity achievement. High exploration, high commitment. This is the goal. Not perfection, not certainty about everything, a sense of self that has been genuinely tested and genuinely chosen. A teenager who has wrestled with the questions and arrived at commitments that are actually theirs. The rooted teenager looks confident, but it's a different kind of confidence than the performer. The performer is certain because they've never been questioned. The rooted is stable because they have been. That teenager can engage, challenge, hold complexity, and sit with hard questions without the whole structure collapsing. That's the formation goal. Here's the part that changes how parents think about their role. You can guide exploration, you can encourage commitment, but you cannot do either of those things for your teenager. You cannot explore on their behalf. You cannot manufacture genuine commitment by applying enough pressure. What you could do is create the conditions: a home where questions feel safe, a relationship where they believe you can handle what they actually think, an adult who isn't so unsettled by the wrestling that they need it to stop. That is mentoring. And the less mentoring present, the greater the risk in every position. Now that you have the map, here's how digital access interacts with each position. For a floater, an unmonitored phone tends to deepen the drift. The algorithm does the exploring for them without requiring any commitment to any identity. For a performer, a phone with mentoring can actually open up exploration that the home environment hasn't made room for. And that's useful if you're in conversation. For a seeker, the phone can be genuinely useful or genuinely destabilizing, depending almost entirely on whether there's a mentoring relationship helping them interpret what they're finding. For a teenager moving toward the rooted, the phone is a tool. It expands connection and exploration without defining identity. The variable isn't the device, it isn't the age, it's whether the mentoring is present. So when you look at your teenager right now, which position do you see? Drifting without engaging, the floater? Certain without having explored, the performer? Actively wrestling in a way that makes you nervous, the seeker? Or arriving at something that feels genuinely theirs, the rooted? That map tells you more than their age does, and it changes the question from how do I control this to how do I stay present in it? In the next episode, I'm staying on one position specifically, the performer, because it's the one that shows up most in faith households. It looks like a good kid, and it's more fragile than it appears. That episode is the one most parents tell me they needed years earlier. So, what to do? Here's a couple calls to action. I created a free identity formation assessment. I'll put the link in the description. It shows you which of the 4 positions your teenager is in right now, and you can do it in 5 minutes. Also, I want you to comment below, which of the 4 positions did you recognize your teenager in? The floater, the performer, the seeker, or genuinely headed toward the rooted? I read every comment. I'd love to read yours. Please subscribe and hit the bell for episode 3, the performer problem. It's the episode that stops rooms at conferences, and it's the one most parents in faith communities need most. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget, be unique, but belong. Thank you.